In 1964, Hamer unsuccessfully ran for a seat in the U.S. Senate. She continued to work on other projects, including grassroots-level Head Start programs and Martin Luther King Jr.'s Poor People's Campaign. With the help of Julius and Mary Varela, she published her autobiography in 1967. She said she was tired of all this beating, and there's so much hate. Only God has kept the Negro sane. Hamer sought equality across all aspects of society. In Hamer's view, African Americans were not technically free if they were not afforded the same opportunities as whites, including those in the agricultural industry. Sharecropping was the most common form of post-slavery activity and income in the South. The New Deal era expanded so that many blacks were physically and economically displaced due to the various projects appearing around the country. Hamer did not wish to have blacks be dependent on any group for any longer. So, she wanted to give them a voice through an agricultural movement. Hamer was a staunch opponent of abortion, calling it legalized murder, in a 1969 speech at the White House and describing her position in terms of her Christian faith. In Until I Am Free, historian Keisha N. Blaine writes, Hamer viewed birth control and abortion as social justice issues. She feared that both were simply white supremacist tools to regulate the lives of impoverished black people and even prevent the growth of the black population. James Eastland, a white senator, was among the groups of people who sought to keep African Americans disenfranchised and segregated from society. His influence on the overarching agricultural industry often suppressed minority groups to keep whites as the only power force in America. Hamer objected to this, and consequently pioneered the Freedom Farm Cooperative, FFC, in 1969, an attempt to redistribute economic power across groups and to solidify an economic standing amongst African Americans. In the same vein as the Freedom Farm Collective, Hamer partnered with the National Council of Negro Women, NCNW, to establish an interracial and interregional support program called the Pig Project to provide protein for people who previously could not afford meat. Hamer made it her mission to make land more accessible to African Americans. To do this, she started a small pig bank, with a starting donation from the NCNW of 5 boars and 50 gilts. Through the pig bank, a family could care for a pregnant female pig until it bore its offspring. Subsequently, they would raise the piglets and use them for food and financial gain. Within 5 years, thousands of pigs were available for breeding. Hamer used the success of the bank to begin fundraising for the Maine Farming Corporation. She was able to convince the then editor of the Harvard Crimson, James Fallows, to write an article that advocated for donations to the FFC. Eventually, the FFC had raised around $8,000, which allowed Hamer to purchase 40 acres of land previously owned by a black farmer who could no longer afford to occupy the land. This land became the Freedom Farm. The farm had 3 main objectives. These were to establish an agricultural organization that could supplement the nutritional needs of America's most disenfranchised people, to provide acceptable housing development, and to create an entrepreneurial business incubator that would provide resources for new companies and retraining for those with limited education but manual labor experience. Over time, the FFC offered various other services such as financial counseling, a scholarship fund and a housing agency. The FFC aided in securing 35 Federal Housing Administration (FHA) subsidized houses for struggling black families. Through her success, Hamer managed to acquire a new home, which served as inspiration for others to begin building themselves up. The FFC ultimately disbanded in 1975 due to lack of funding. In 1971, Hamer co-founded the National Women's Political Caucus. She emphasized the power women could hold by acting as a voting majority in the country regardless of race or ethnicity, saying, "A white mother is no different from a black mother. The only thing is they haven't had as many problems. But we cry the same tears."